Hi, and welcome to Reviving an Idler. Yeah, so we have got wood finally. So we are able to start progressing with the ribs. We have some good slabs of solid white oak, so that's great. We're going to get at least 2 frames out of those, and I also have a little strip of wood which I aim to be able to try and put another couple of steamed ribs in with that. We've also got a large chunk of oak as well, which I could either use for some ribs, but more likely, given the thickness of it, I'm going to use that to replace some of the floors as I'm going along. So that's great. It's certainly enough to get started with, but before we go down that road and we start removing frames or taking templates, we need to do some fundamentals. Just like everything in life, you need to start with a solid foundation, and that's what we need to do with the boat. What we need is get the boat level, and we're going to do that by using her waterline and the ribs. Now the ribs will come up at 90 degrees to the waterline of the boat, not so much the keel but the waterline, and I still have some lines left from where the waterline was. Now I'm not sure if you'll be able to make it out from where you are, but there is an etched line in the hull here that runs along, and our waterline is there, and we've saved some of the paint as well so we can have a good reference for that. And that's what we'll do with that. So today's mission is going to be largely about squaring off the boat. I want to make sure that she is jacked up and she's level with the waterline. I then want to make sure that the stem post and stern post are not twisted out of alignment, and for that I'm going to be using a laser level. And then finally I'll level her up across the gunnels as well, so that we've got her completely plumb down the middle. Now, she is an old boat, as I keep saying. We all know that she's going to twist, she's going to have moved in her life, so she's not going to be plans perfect, and I'm fully aware that we're not going to be able to get many things absolutely perfect. We're going to be fiddling and fairing quite a lot as we start to fit anything into her as we go along. But having something solid to work to is going to be beneficial as we progress with the project. Having at least the knowledge that when you put a spirit level onto the waterline, at least you know that that is level then, and you've got something you can work from that you can reference. It is completely possible that we can muddle our way through as she is and just whack ribs in, and she'll work, she'll float. But we have the opportunity to make sure that we can do a slightly better job than that, so we're as well taking a day or 2 days, whatever it may take, to make sure that she's all squared off and plumb before we start the project. So that's what this episode is largely going to be about, getting her all squared up and ready, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we can finally get on to starting getting some sawn frames into her. So hang tight. So there's 2 things that I'm going to need to help me. So the first thing is obviously a bottle jack, and that's 5 ton rated, so that's more than enough to lift the entire boat, never mind just the bow section. So we've levelled out a bit of ground, and we'll use that just to slowly lift the front. Now we need to come up round about 4 inches. Obviously we'll use the next tool to determine exactly how much it needs to come up, but it'll be round about that. And the next tool is this rather jury-rigged spirit level. Now, with much attention to detail and great pains, I've managed to get this very close to level with the waterline just by eyeballing it. Now it's suspended on a bit of string over the gunnel and simply hung in there. As you can see, we are quite a bit off the level, and I don't think there's any way I'll be able to really show you on the camera either, but we're pretty close to on the line with that spirit level, and I'll use that to check how level we are as we go up. So we'll jack up the front, and I'll keep popping back and peeking at that spirit just to see that we're on track. And that's us. Job's a good one. Let's hope we don't get squished. So I've just added in this extra little jack here. That's not because of a weight issue, it's because the load going straight down from the boat onto the one jack is actually breaking the bit of wood I've put under it and sinking the jack into the ground. It's just because the ground underneath the boat is quite soft. So we'll just put another one in there, try and spread the load, jack them both up, and that will hopefully make it a little bit easier. But the boat is lifting, we are getting her up, so we are making progress. still nowhere even close. Now she is nice and light, so she is quite happy moving. You could probably jack her up as quick as anything if I was, you know, if she had her beaching legs fitted and wasn't worried about her cowping over. It doesn't also help that the ground actually slopes away down at the bow, so we've got a little bit of extra height to gain. Slowly, slowly, little by little, and we'll get there. This is by far the scariest thing I've done with the boat so far. I just feel like the whole thing is just going to either collapse on you or just kick out and turn turtle. And there's not a lot of space to run away in. I assure you, my fingers are well and truly crossed. So we're about halfway. We're starting to get some movement finally. So we are just about there. We're just a couple of mils away from being level on the water line, or at least as close as we can get to it without using lasers and getting a little bit more sophisticated. As you can see, we've jacked her up quite a lot, and in fact she's actually standing. The stem post is actually about level with the top of my head. Now I'm 6'4", so that's we've lifted her up quite a lot considering I could quite easily peer over the top. I was expecting to get about 4 inches lift, and we've raised her at least 6 at the moment. Without measuring it, it could actually be closer to 7. And I think we've probably got another 10 mil, so half an inch or so to go before she's levelled off, so a little bit more than I was expecting. But she looks a bit scary up there now, doesn't she? Okay, so that's round 1 over. We've got her levelled up along the water line, so that's great. Next step is to try and tilt the stem post and stern post so that they are level, so we're level across the gunnels. Make sure that that's fine, and then next thing we're going to do is jump inside and use laser levels, bits of string, and we're going to try and make sure that the stem post and stern post are not twisted out of line. Once we've done that, we'll rig a batten or a piece of string, and we'll measure from that batten out to the edges, to the gunnels of the boat, and just to find out how much she's potentially slipped and fallen away from the centre line as well, if anything. Once we've established all of that, we've got a good datum to work from. We've got a good place to start actually installing ribs. Just another little thing that I noticed. If you watched the last video, you'll remember we were talking about the planking and how much it could open up. And that seam was hard closed in the last video. That was about a month ago I released that one. thereabouts. And the weather has changed dramatically in that time. It is a lot warmer. It's much more like summer. We still have cold nights, we have frosts occasionally still, but generally speaking throughout the day we're talking around about 10 to 15 degrees, so it's getting much warmer. And you can already see these gaps have opened up a lot. When you compare them to the last video, they were hard up and nice and tight, so that just shows you how much your planking can move and how quickly your planking can move. Just interesting. So one of the next things I'm looking to try and do here is establish a centre line for the whole boat, and from that I can measure from the line out to the edge of a gunnel or the edge of a rib or something, and I can determine how far from the centre line the boat has potentially spread or is being pressed or is being twisted. Now ignore this top line here, that's not necessary, but this bottom line is attached to a hook which I've put into the centre of the stern post and anchored into the centre of the stem post as well. Stretch that line across so it's nice and taut, and I'll be able to then have a centre point. Using a spirit level, just to make sure that our laser level sits where it should do. You can get ones that are self-leveling, all kinds of stuff. This is a no frills simple laser. And I can pop that on the centre line of there, and I can then bounce a crosshair off the top mark and the bottom mark to make sure the stem post is actually in line. That's level here. It's also levelled across the midships of the gunnels as well. So I know that this part of the boat is fairly square as to where it should be. I'll do the same thing moving forward and the same thing moving aft, and that'll tell me then if the bows and the stems are twisted out of alignment from the middle of the boat. I have got two marks on the top, so I've got a top mark and a bottom mark in the middle, and as long as both of those are on the line projected by the laser, I know that the stem post has not been kicked out one side or the other, and luckily it's looking like the stem post is actually fairly straight. From poking around earlier, I do think there is a bit of twisting going on, and I think the stem and stern post are not perfectly aligned. So when I flip this around and do the exact opposite on the stern side, I expect to see perhaps the stern post leaning over a little bit. How I remedy the situation if that is the case, I think is going to be fairly simple. The boat has very little structural members in it apart from these bilge stringers and the keel. The deck is not doing very much at all. These deck beams aren't doing anything at all really, which means the fact that the boat's twisted is probably actually just down to how I've actually chopped her up, how she's actually supported underneath. In order to change the angles of the frames and levelling up, it could be as simple as hammering in an extra wedge along one side and just twisting the boat externally, so it's all realigned. And I think that's largely going to be the case. As I've said already, this is not going to be perfect, this is not going to be an exact science. She is old, she will have moved, timbers will have stretched and shrunk over her years, and she will not be plumb straight as you would try and build her off a plan or something like that. She is going to be moved. And it's whether she's moved enough to merit taking remedial action or not, and that's what I'm checking by doing all these measurements and drawing all these lines and projecting all these lines. But certainly the stem, where the marks meet the bilge stringers there, across the stem post, quite happy with everything going forward from this point. That all looks quite square and plumb to me, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to jump up, flip everything around and do the same on the other side, and then we'll have a good idea where we stand with that. Well, I'm not 100% sure that you can see this laser again, but if you can, I'm wiggling it across there, lining up, and yeah, remarkably square. There's a little bit of twist off to the starboard side there. That's sitting just a little bit lower down this side slightly, but actually not too bad. Okay. Okay, so the last trick I'm going to try with this is I'm actually going to put the laser level squared off on the stern post like that. Fire, so this is square to that, to the stern post, and fire laser down onto the stem post and just have a look at that and just see how square and true that looks as well. I'm actually surprised. I actually thought she was going to be kicked over a lot more than she was, but she's actually quite square after levelling her up on the gunnels. Which means when I put my spirit level across the gunnels and was seeing the difference in the level, it's not actually down to the backbone of the boat, it's down to the sides having fallen out or been brought in, which is good because that means that basically as long as I take a solid frame, recut that, put it back down, by the time I fasten everything together again, it's going to put the strength back in and that will bring the sides back to where they should be. So I think potentially dodged the bullet on that one again. I swear, this boat is the gift that just keeps on giving. Just very lucky so far. Wait, we'll get hit by lightning soon. Okay, so taking as close as I can get to being square, yeah, and obviously the caveat is assuming that this is as square as it can be, so there is a fair element of uncertainty here, but firing a line from that laser straight off onto the bow, I can see I'm already straight on the top mark. I can't see the bottom mark, so I can't see if it's completely straight down through just now. I'm going to wander up forward and just see if it's touching the bottom mark, so just the light levels are a bit low. And I'm going to say that eyeballing it, that looks within a safe level. And I don't think we need to take any serious steps to realign the boat or anything. I think she's going to be fine just as she is. Only thing I would like to check just before I go any further, I want to take a quick measurement from our plumb line to the gunnels, the whole way down both sides. I'll jot that down and I'll have a rough measurement as to how far that point is from that point is from that point, and they should be fairly close, but they will be slightly different. There will be movement, but that will then show me how far out the boat has potentially sunk. So for something like this, it helps to draw a little map. Frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, etc. I'm just going to measure to the inside part of the stringer here, down to the centre line, and that is 39.5 inches. Okay, so we've taken our measurements up and we have something that looks a little bit like this. Please excuse the scribbles, as is typical with my videos. I messed it up halfway through and I kicked the string, snapping it in two, so I had to retie it. That inevitably meant that I had to retake all the dimensions, so that's them crossed out there. pretty straightforward what you're looking at. You've got frame 1 here, that's the distance from the line to the top of the gunwale on the port side of the boat, and that's the distance on the starboard side. Now I've got that, you can see quite clearly we have a little bit of bowing on the port side of the boat. It's starting to hang out. All the dimensions are slightly longer on this side than they are on the starboard, so that's telling us that we have a little bit of bowing out, a little bit of bending on that side. That was what we expected, but it's good to be able to actually quantify it, and as you'll see, it's actually not very much. In my opinion, that's not a lot. We're only talking, you know, up to an inch thereabouts, so I think that's within the realms, and I think once we put the new frames in, we will cut them to be the same size on either side, so we'll cut them as mirror images, and when we put them in, that will hopefully bring that side of the boat back into where it should be. Well, that's realistically all I'm going to get done for this short episode. I hope that has been of use to you. It is something of a black art, sort of taking your level of a wooden boat, any boat in fact, to be honest. It's a tricky thing, there are curves everywhere, there are no flat lines really to work with, so having any tools at your disposal, such as using strings, levels, water lines and spirit levels, etc., are all useful tools when it comes to finding some form of datum or some form of level. I hope some of the things I've shown you in this episode can be useful to you in determining how you are going to level your boat, if that's something you're going to be looking at doing. For us and Idler Restoration, moving forward, we are in a great position. We now have wood, and we are going to be looking at putting in a couple of sawn frames. Stay tuned for that. So that episode will hopefully very swiftly follow this one. Anyway, thank you very, very much for watching, sharing and subscribing, and again a huge thank you to my patrons and anybody who has donated in some way to the project. Like I say every time, I cannot thank you enough. You really are driving forward the project, keeping it going, keeping me motivated, and it's wonderful to have you on board for the adventure. So thank you again from me and from Idler, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.